When you're part of a justice movement or part of anything really, the last thing that you really should be doing is surrounding yourself in an echo chamber of people who agree with you and never going outside of that. That's why I genuinely enjoy listening to people who are pro-animal abuse and anti-being kind to animals to see what kind of arguments they have to say and what kind of things they have to say about crazy people like me who think that hurting animals isn't necessary or moral. So, I actually accidentally happened upon a podcast episode by a podcast called The Hunting Collective. It's an older episode, it's from 2019, but it just came up, and it was where the hunting dude who runs the podcast talks to a couple of animal rights people and about veganism and animal rights. So I thought this would be really interesting to respond to some of the things that they were saying. And right off the bat, they're talking about vegans, like animal rights. Should animals have rights? And they sound really skeptical, not taking the lives of innocent animals. I don't know about that. So, I don't know, they're coming into it with a pretty already closed off tone and mindset. It seems like they're right away, and I haven't listened to this all yet. I am recording this as I listen to it, hear something and then come here and make my points. But yeah, they sound like they're pretty determined to not actually be open to what they're saying. So apparently they go to a vegan butcher in Berkeley, California, and these two dudes are like, vegan butcher, butcher by definition is reserved for people who are torturing animals. It doesn't seem like that can be vegan. I'm pretty confused on, and then the other guy goes, well, why if they want to make something that's so close to meat that it's almost meat, just not meat, then why don't they just eat the meat? I don't really see the point. And first of all, thank you for admitting that it's so close, because, that helps us to show non-vegans that vegan meat is pretty much almost identical. So thank you for that. And the second thing is the point. In order to understand the point, you have to consider the victim of the situation, which are the animals. The animals who are suffering and abused, terrified, waiting in line outside of the slaughterhouse, who don't want to die, who try their best to escape. If you consider their perspective, you might understand that the point of a vegan butcher is to allow people to have the same pleasurable eating experiences, have a BLT, a steak, whatever, without causing a sentient animal to go through that experience. That's the point. And it's laughable to me that would be confusing. But a lot of people, they've never heard animal rights before, so let's see how the rest of this episode goes. I'm curious. Okay, so they just started talking about DXE, which is Direct Action Everywhere, an animal rights group based in Berkeley, and they're talking about the fact that Priya, one of the founders who I really look up to and respect, has a lot of felonies for doing her activism. And they're just starting it out right like that, she has felonies. But the thing is, a lot of activists in a lot of different movements had felonies or were imprisoned or arrested for speaking out, if you look at the civil rights movement, for example. So that doesn't necessarily mean that the person is bad or doing something bad or harmful, because legality does not equal morality, and there are bad laws, and as Regan Russell put it so poignantly, good people break bad laws. And then they say that DXE usually targets factory farming, which is true. But then both of these two guys are like, I'm against factory farming, and I would say you are too, right? And the other guy goes, yeah, I think there's probably a better way to do it. Humans are smart. We could probably figure out a better way. But, they don't attempt to describe what that better way might be. So it'd be interesting to hear them try and describe that. And also, I'm willing to bet, since they're not vegan at all, they're hunters, like, they were describing eating deer hearts, for fuck's sake. Like, very not vegan. I have no reason to believe that either of these two dudes are boycotting factory farming with their daily lifestyles by never purchasing factory farmed meat. Like, I doubt that they're doing that. Maybe it'll come out that they do, but I have no reason to believe that they're doing that when they kill animals as a fun hobby. So, they're also just coming right out away, showing their own hypocrisy, saying that they're against factory farms, while more than likely still supporting factory farms. And also not being able to provide what that, quote, better way to kill billions of animals to feed the world is. Okay, so the podcast host just said that while he was at the vegan butcher, he was looking at the menu, and he said, oh, there's some unlisted ingredients in these meals. They're saying chicken sandwich, but it's not made out of a dead animal, so who knows what it's made out of? They're not listing ingredients. So, first of all, a menu is not where you find a full length of ingredients. Nobody has ever made a menu and then put all the ingredients under it, unless the ingredients were really simple and it was a short list. Like, how many non-vegan restaurants are there that don't have, like, nobody puts ingredients on their menu? If you ever Google how many ingredients are in a Taco Bell bean burrito, it's a paragraph long. So I just don't even see what point you're trying to make there. But, my guy, if you want to talk about unlisted ingredients, why don't we talk about the unlisted ingredients of blood and pus that's in every bit of dairy, because the cows have mastitis and infections when they're getting milked, and they're legally allowed to have a certain amount of pus, which they disguise with the euphemism somatic cell count. That means pus. And what about the unlisted ingredient that has been found to be in every sample of ground beef that they found in this study? They found feces. There's feces in meat. And in this study, which I can't remember what it is, but I'll try to put it in the show notes, shows that every sample they took of meat contained literal shit. So, if you want to talk about unlisted ingredients and you're too lazy to ask the restaurant owner to give you the ingredients, why don't we talk about the unlisted ingredients and the things that you are consuming? And one of the guys just said something about, I had a chicken Parmesan sandwich, and these people are trying to say that eating chicken is wrong. They're confused about why someone would say eating chicken is wrong, so I'll get to that in a second. But, if you're eating a chicken Parmesan sandwich, I'm willing to bet that the chicken is probably from a factory farm, and the piece of breast milk coagulated, sliced on the chicken is probably also from a factory farm, unless you literally source everything that you ever eat from non-factory farms, which nobody does that. I've never met a non-vegan who does that. So there you go. A hypocrite claiming to be against factory farming while paying for factory farming. And, it kind of seems like it should be not needing an explanation, but the reason why people are saying it's wrong to eat chicken, it's morally wrong to eat chicken, is because an animal had to suffer and die for that chicken, and it's not necessary for our health. And there's a vegan alternative. So there's a victim involved in that action, and we're saying it's wrong because of said harming of said victim. So, in case you were confused, because these guys keep saying we're so confused, let me clear it up for you. All right, so the guy just said that his wife was asking for more white meat and that he doesn't want to buy meat from the grocery store. even though he probably eats out at restaurants that are still from factory farming, but that's besides the point. He's saying, he's trying not to buy meat from the grocery store, and his wife wants more white meat, so he went out and killed 10 turkeys to supply them with white meat for the year. And, turkeys are beautiful animals. I've met them. They make purring sounds when you pet them. They're just like cats or dogs, really. They don't need to die. They don't want to die. So that's really sad that he felt the need to take 10 lives of individuals because his wife wanted white meat when they could have eaten vegan meat. But then he also said something really interesting. He said as he was eating a chicken sandwich at the vegan butcher, he said it looked like meat. I felt like he was about to say it tasted like meat, but he hesitated and caught himself. He said it was good. It tasted like food. Imagine that, food tasting like food. What a concept. But he said, I'd rather eat the faux meat than support a Purdue factory farmed meat because I feel better about it. So that's really interesting. You wouldn't expect someone who kills animals as a hobby to actually have some amount of conscious or care about his food choices. So I didn't expect to hear that. That's interesting. So my guy, what I want to know is if you feel better and sleep better at night eating faux meat than eating factory farmed meat, then why wouldn't you feel better eating faux meat than eating, the meat that you killed yourself? That would be something that I would ask him if I was talking to him personally. He says again, I'd rather have this faux meat than factory farmed chicken, even though it doesn't have the ingredients listed, but it has apparently wheat and soy and tree nuts in it. So he does know what the ingredients are. I don't even know what he's trying to do there. If you ask anybody what the ingredients are in their food, they're going to tell you. People have allergies. But anyway, he said, I'd like to buy the faux meat instead of factory farmed meat, but when they call it chicken, I'm just so confused. It's just so confusing. Why can't they call it what it is? And I find that kind of funny because actually they don't call it chicken. They'll call it chicken, but they will spell it differently. A lot of times it'll be CHIK''N. So if you're confused and don't see that that's a different word, I don't got much to say because I don't know why it's confusing unless you don't have any points to make, so that's what you're going to latch on to, essentially. So the other guy keeps saying things like, if they are so against meat, why are they calling it chicken? If they are so against meat, why are they making things that taste like chicken? It's so simple, dude. It's because we want people to understand that they don't have to give up their favorite food in order to stop hurting animals. I just don't know why that's confusing or hard to understand. You know why it's confusing for you? It's because you're not considering the victim. You just think a chicken's dead corpse is a food, and that's why you're confused, because you're not considering the fact that an animal has to die for that in one version and an animal doesn't have to die in the other version, because you're so programmed and conditioned into thinking that dead bodies are food that you don't even think about the fact that they were once a living, breathing creature who wanted to live. Okay, so the guy keeps going on I just didn't know what the ingredients were. I could see that the allergens were soy, wheat, and tree nut, but, I looked on their website and they didn't have ingredients and wanted to know the ingredients, but I didn't get much of an answer. So he doesn't say that he actually went and asked somebody for the ingredients, which he probably didn't. It's not like they would withhold ingredients from him. And he keeps saying, I'm confused. I don't know what I'm eating. I must be missing something. Is there a point that I'm missing? Yes, there's a point that you're missing. And that's the perspective of the victim involved in actual chicken corpse. That's what you're missing. All right, one of the guys said, one time I had these mushrooms and I made mushroom steaks, but nobody was confused of what the steak was made out of because it was just mushroom. And it's Okay, well, here's the thing. In order to be vegan, you don't have to eat mock meats. Okay, nobody's forcing you at gunpoint to eat mock meats and forcing you to not see the ingredient list. Like, if you don't want to eat mock meats, don't eat mock meats. Eat porter. Like, I prefer mushroom burgers. I prefer beet burgers and things that are made out of whole plant foods than the faux meats that are more processed. But either way, like, just don't hurt a fucking animal for a fucking sandwich, okay? So they're saying that, they're admitting that having faux meat alternatives that taste exactly like meat is a good thing, and that, they'd eat it and it's enjoyable and they don't have a problem with it. But they keep saying like, oh, but we're so confused. We don't know what's in it. And then they're calling fake meat or faux meat, smoke and mirrors. Like, they're acting like it's a big secret what the ingredients are and that there's no possible way to find out, and they're keeping it secret from you, which is hilarious, because if you just asked somebody, they would tell you. And it's really ironic, because the actual foods that are keeping secrets from you and having smoke and mirrors are animal agriculture. They don't tell you that there's literal shit and pus and blood in their products. They have smoke and mirrors where they're like, ooh, it's organic, it's free range, it's local, the animal was killed nicely. If you want to talk about smoke and mirrors, that's actually what smoke and mirrors is. Not this lie that you're telling that there's no possible way to see the ingredients of a vegan faux meat. That's ridiculous. You didn't try to ask anybody. Oh man, he just really said that he, as a hunter, they like to celebrate the closeness of their food and celebrate and tell the story of how their food got to the plate. Yeah, they're celebrating and with pride describing how they took the life of an innocent creature by hiding and using a gun, a defenseless creature who didn't even have a chance at fighting for their life. Like, that's apparently something to celebrate. And then they're saying like, oh, when I kill a mountain lion and I give it to people that come over, they know it's a mountain lion and I can tell them, here's what I did to the mountain lion. It's just like, but with vegan food, you can say like, yeah, I made these burgers. They have sweet potatoes, they have quinoa, they have black beans. And you can describe how these things were grown. You can even grow them in your own garden sometimes, some of the ingredients, and you can be like, yeah, this is how I made this, and the best part is that an animal didn't have to be harmed for it. So I just don't get, they're operating on this like false, I don't know the word, but just this false story of that it's impossible to know what the ingredients in a faux meat are. It's just interesting that that's what they're going with. I don't know. So the place they were at was the butcher's son. And they keep saying over and over that the guy literally said that they have a blindfold on you to where you can't know the ingredients or something. Maybe I should try and contact them and find the ingredients. I don't know. But it's so funny because animal agriculture is the one that actually puts the blindfold on people, like I said, and hides how meat, dairy, eggs, and fish are made. And he says again, like, oh, I'd love to eat the vegan faux meat with my wife, but I'd rather it be called a whoppity bloop than have it be called chicken when it's not chicken. So it's just going to show that the only thing that they can actually find, quote, wrong with having vegan meat alternatives is semantics and the name that they're calling it. Oh my God, he really went there. He really just went there. He was saying, soy is an ingredient. Well, that has a consequence. When they increase soy production, they have to slash rainforests. And I'm just over here face palming because any vegan activist knows that over 80%, I think the number might be even higher, you can fact check me, go ahead, of soy is fed to livestock. So if you are concerned about soy and the rainforests, you have to go vegan by your own logic. Rainforest destruction is not for a few vegans having tofu. Like, vegans are a very small percentage of the world's population. But there are 56 billion land animals that eat plants, and a lot of the time soy, that have to eat pounds and pounds of it. And that's where the majority is going. Cattle ranching is the main cause of Amazon rainforest and other rainforest deforestation. So it is literally fucking hilarious to me that they're even saying that. They're shooting themselves in the foot right now. This so far is worse than I thought it would be. And they also went with the avocados and quinoa are bad argument. There's a couple of problems with this. For one thing, vegans are not the only ones eating avocados or quinoa. If you think about the Super Bowl, most people that are watching the Super Bowl are not vegan. They want to have guac with their Super Bowl. Okay? It's just ridiculous to make the false claim that vegans are the only ones eating avocados or quinoa. It's just blatantly false. And the second thing is avocados are farmed bad and quinoa is farmed bad. That's not an argument against veganism. That's an argument against eating avocados and eating quinoa. Okay? And another thing is that they can farm avocados or quinoa in a way that is better. You know, they can take out the corruption, do something different. I actually don't, like my boyfriend and I, we don't support avocados for these ethical reasons, like child labor and stuff. I don't know that much about quinoa. That's actually something I need to research, but it should go without saying, but you don't have to eat avocados or quinoa in order to be vegan and not participate in animal suffering. And then another thing they said is that, well, you gotta eat something, and no matter what, you're always gonna not feel good about something, and you're gonna harm something. And yeah, that's a very valid point, you know? However, veganism is not about being perfect. We acknowledge that we cause harm by existing. It's just that when you're choosing to support animal suffering and animal agriculture, you're saying, well, I want to maximize the amount of harm I want to create on this earth. You know, I don't want to do anything to try and do the least harm I can. I want to maximize it. And that is the difference. If you didn't know, eating a non-vegan diet is killing more plants because the livestock and the animals being raised, they have to eat fucking plants. And they drink gallons of water a day and they eat a shit ton of plants. So if you want to talk about plants ethics, then by your own logic, go to a vegan diet, you'll be consuming less plants. And that statement is supported by an Oxford University study that they've done that shows that we reduce our land and resource use by 75% on a vegan diet. All right, so now he says he was invited to a house in Berkeley where 10 DXE activists lived. And he's saying like, oh, they had rescued dogs there and there's a lot of people living there. And he admits that these are intelligent, well-meaning people. And he says, like, because of their worldview, they're willing to do things that we wouldn't do, and they're willing to think in ways that we wouldn't think. So, you know, it's very telling, like, from the man himself, you know? It's just about changing your worldview, or expanding it, really, towards truth. It's not like you're being brainwashed into something false, or like a religion or something. You're just expanding your worldview to encompass others' suffering and truth and facts. Okay, so we're getting into where they have a debate with these activists, and it's really interesting what he does now, because he says, oh, in this one part of the conversation, they were talking about having dominion over animals and saying that they should have the same rights as people, but I actually cut this part of the conversation out, and I'm just gonna explain it to you in my own words now. I think that's a pretty dishonest thing to do when you're trying to be fair and show a debate. I don't know why someone would do that. Like when I'm listening to a debate, I want to hear every single bit of it from both sides. So it would lead you to wonder, like, did they get humanely slaughtered with some vegan logic, and they don't want to put that in their podcast because it makes them look bad? You know what I mean? It's just, I think that's noteworthy. Okay, so the part he says that he cut out was when they were talking about, the guys were like, you can't give animals rights. If you explain rights to animals, they don't even know what that means. And the vegan activists were like, well, disabled people, you can't really explain to disabled people what their rights mean. So, you know, by that logic, does that mean disabled people shouldn't have rights? And so these two guys are like, oh, that's offensive, so I'm taking that out of this debate. And then they're saying, oh, what the vegans do is they try to back you in a corner with these logic traps. And I thought that was pretty funny. That's an interesting way of putting the fact that you can't argue with vegan logic. But, you know, you're basically admitting that you can't argue with vegan logic. And you're also going on a false thing, because it's not like they were saying that disabled people and animals are the same or morally the same. They're saying that they're applying your logic to another situation to show you how faulty the logic is. So, but what you're gonna do, since you can't argue with that, is try and make it seem like these vegan rights activists want to eat disabled people or something, or that they think that that's morally the same as eating animals, which is not what they're proposing. It's dishonest. I don't know if I've ever really listened to a debate where the people were like, oh, we took this part out of the debate. Like, it seems a little weird to me. The only way that you could get offended by the point they're making about applying the logic to disabled people is if you misunderstood them and thought that they were saying that animals and disabled people are exactly the same, which is not what they're saying. And I run into this a lot as a vegan activist. Like, I spoke to a truck driver, and I have it on my YouTube channel, Alicia Demi, and my boyfriend and I were asking the truck driver, the slaughter truck driver, like, you know, if you were asked to drive human slaves, would you drive them? And the guy was really a piece of you know what. And he said, yeah, I'd drive human slaves. I don't give a fuck. And the point in that is to expose the immorality and the mindset of animal agriculture and people that kill animals for a living. But I got a bunch of comments that are missing that point entirely, and that they're saying like, oh, you think slaves and animals are the same? And it's like, interesting. Would you mind pointing out to me where I said that they're the same? Because I actually didn't say that. Yeah, so he says that he felt offended and that it was disrespectful to disabled people or people who have loved ones who are disabled. He's trying to claim that they were saying that they're morally the same. And, you know, I guess we won't know what they said because it's cut out of the debate. Personally, I'm not one of those people who thinks that humans and animals are on the same moral plane. But you don't have to in order to not hurt animals, as hurting animals is not necessary and cruel. Just like I don't love all humans, but that doesn't mean I just punch the ones in the face that I don't love. No, I leave them alone. And he says it was a weird thing for them to say, and then he says it's almost as weird, or it's as weird as eating a chicken grinder with no chicken. And that was really interesting too, because, you know, if you just think about the principle of having a sandwich without a dead body is weird, but having a sandwich with a dead body is normal. You know, do I need to say anything? I don't think I do. All right, so this is pretty interesting. He starts saying that, you know, we've done things in history and then we look back on them later and discuss, like, how did we ever do that, such as human slavery, which human slavery is still going on today, but I'm assuming they're talking about, like, the slavery that the U.S. was founded on of African Americans. And they said, like, they argue that back in the day, everyone thought slavery was fine, and there was a few people saying, no, it's wrong, and that vegans feel like they're in a similar position to where they feel what we're doing to animals is wrong and everyone else feels it's normal. They don't actually have an argument against, like, this logic. All they're saying is, you can't, like, compare humans to animals. But you don't have to believe human suffering is equal to animal suffering in order to see that there are parallels and that the logic applies to both situations. Just the logic, not the value of human versus animal. It's not human versus animal. It's logic in one situation and taking that same logic in another situation. Since it's so hard for people to understand that maybe we shouldn't hurt animals. And they say a couple of things here that are just wrong. First of all, they're saying slavery as if it's a thing of the past, but it's still going on today, human slavery. And the other thing is that they're saying that humans have been eating animals longer than they've been enslaving other humans. But they're failing to realize that the more research we do into ancestors, the more we realize that we didn't start hunting and killing animals until we developed the tools in which to do so. We weren't naturally able to do that. We were more like scavengers. Like, we were the last of the scavengers. After every animal was eating an animal, humans would be the last ones to show up to that dead animal and get what we could from it. Because we don't naturally have claws, teeth, high speed running. We were eating plants. We were herbivores until we had, like, these tools to help us out. And yes, we had to eat meat at certain periods of time to survive, but that's irrelevant because it's 2020. We have grocery stores. And there's no scientific evidence to show that we need animal products or that we're obligate omnivores. So it's really an irrelevant point to even make. But they did admit that, like, we're right in making that point. You know, that comparison of, like, we used to do something in history and then later found out that it was wrong. They admit that we're right about that. That they can only find a problem with comparing human to animal. But again, you don't have to compare human to animal in order to just use logic in different situations to test said logic. So they're talking about how, like, we're not sure if these people feel so strongly that they're willing to die because they're willing to get felonies for this movement, but, like, maybe they're also willing to die. And I mean, I just don't really know what the point of saying that is, because if you feel so strongly about a justice movement that you're willing to die for it, that's kind of like a personal thing and not really a reflection on the movement. I mean, it's not as if vegan people out there like Earthling Ed is telling people to die for veganism. You know, it's not like the military telling you to die for your country or religions to telling you to die for your religion. Like, so I just don't really know what he's trying to say. I mean, for me personally, would I die for veganism? No. I mean, yeah, no, I would not. I would do my best to stay alive so that I can educate people. And, you know, but would I be willing to get a felony? I don't know. I'd have to learn more about it and have a really good lawyer. And then, you know, if I knew what the heck was going on and was confident about it, then yeah. But if I didn't know what I was doing and could potentially go to jail, probably not. But, you know, maybe I don't know as much as these other activists do, and I don't have, like, connections like that. But it's not really relevant because that's not an argument against veganism, if that makes sense. So I don't even know why he's saying that. It's really funny because we're pretty deep into the podcast now, and they're still talking about, like, how the debate went before the debate is even starting, and he's saying like, oh, just so you know, I didn't like prepare any facts or statistics when I showed this conversation. And that's funny to me because like if I know vegan activists at all, especially in DXE, they probably hit him with a lot of facts and statistics, so he probably is trying to make himself look a little better. And he says he wanted the conversation to be more natural. I don't know how like providing evidence makes the conversation unnatural, but whatever. Wish they would get into the debate already. Once they do get into it, I'll just listen to it all the way through and then give my final thoughts at the end. Because their podcast is really long, and I don't know how long mine is so far. All right, so now he's like, oh, you know, I think I'm going to be more prepared for these conversations now. I learned a lot. Like, there was some logical wins on their part. So, I don't know. It sounds to me like he probably got humanely slaughtered in this debate. So I'm interested to finally get to it if they ever fucking do. Another thing that he literally said is that he was seeing what it's like to be these people for a moment and what it's like to feel like things are being massively murdered. Yeah, so first of all, things? Do you mean animals? They're not inanimate objects, but I could see how convincing yourself that they are would make you feel less guilty. Think they're being massively murdered. Yeah, bro, we don't think so. It's literally happening. 56 billion land animals and trillions of marine animals per year are literally being killed. Now, whether you want to play semantics and talk about whether or not to use the word murder is up to you, it doesn't change the fact that they're having their lives taken for an unnecessary reason. It's not something we think. It's reality. All right, so now the other guy does something very disingenuous, and he says, you know, oh, we talked to activists, we talked to Anonymous for the voiceless, but like my mom or my grandma, I can't remember which, has a farm, and these animals will come up to you and want you to scratch their ear, so like they're not suffering. It's just such a disingenuous thing to say, because first of all, if she sends them off to slaughter, then she's betraying that animal that trusted and thought that they were being cared for by her. Where's the morality in that? It's not necessary to betray your animals and kill them. So, you know, you don't go into that part if that's what's happening, which I'm sure it is. And it's so ridiculous because you're eating a chicken parm sandwich, like you said earlier, that I am 95% willing to bet is all factory farmed, yet you're saying you're against factory farming, and now you're saying like, oh, not all farms are bad. My grandma or my mom has a farm and the animals get pets. It's just like, you know, she's probably still going to kill them, so it's not moral either way, but he's saying that as if, oh, farms in general are not all that bad. Like, they just took this one farm where it's bad, and they're trying to say all farms are that way. Over 95% of meat in the grocery store is factory farmed. And even if they're not factory farmed, it's still made of cruelty. You can't get meat, fish, dairy, and eggs without cruelty, period. Yes, factory farms are the worst of that, but that doesn't mean that other farms are not cruel, that they're not still taking lives and abusing animals. Oh, okay, he just said, and a lot of those critters turn to beef, turn to meat. So yes, this farm that he's speaking about, they're still killed. Well, how did they turn into beef? Man, why don't you describe the process? Why are you skipping over it? How did they go from being a critter to beef? Why don't you tell us? Why don't you explain it? And he gets silent for a minute, stumbles over his words, and says, animals don't have a very long lifespan, and people need to be fed, and this is how they're currently being fed. Well, we could end world starvation if the world went vegan. Now, I know that's like speaking in broad terms, but what I'm saying is that it takes more resources, as I've said earlier, to support a non-vegan diet than a vegan diet. We're growing crops in the Amazon rainforest for cattle in areas of the world where humans are starving. When you eat a piece of meat, you're taking away food from starving human beings, because you're taking that food and you're feeding it to livestock that you do not even need to eat. So think about that next time you want to talk about feeding the world. And I don't know what you're trying to say by saying that animals don't have a long lifespan, but we're cutting their lifespans on average by like a quarter in animal agriculture. So they would have a much longer lifespan if it weren't for humans. Now they're saying that, if we were to go with the world the way the vegans want to go, it would have a cascading negative effect on how we interact with the natural world. Really? Really, guy? Because are you going to provide any stats, evidence, or any facts for that? No. See, you said when you went to this debate you weren't prepared with facts and stats, but you're recording this intro much later, and you still haven't prepared any facts or stats, so you can't back that statement, and it couldn't be further from the truth, because animal agriculture is causing climate change, ocean dead zones, species extinction, they're wiping out land, they're wiping out wildlife. Like, if vegans had their way and the world went vegan, we would be rewilding land that animal agriculture was destroying, and species would start to come back, and the world would start to heal, okay? So, unless you have any evidence, you're blatantly just saying the opposite of the truth. And now they're saying, like, oh, imagine if a year from now it was suddenly illegal to kill an animal, and if you killed an animal, you're a murderer. Well, I mean, if you kill an animal, you are a murderer. If you don't like the word murderer and you want to play semantic games, then you are a killer. You're an innocent life taker. Like, I don't know if you want us to call you something you're not to make you feel less guilty, but that's what you are. So if you don't like that, then maybe don't kill the fucking animal. But it's actually not necessary for us to make killing an animal illegal. All that has to really happen is for the supply and demand to change and for the consumers to stop demanding the meat. Okay, so this is so telling, but he says to the other guy, if you and I erased our worldview and came at it with a clean slate, then what they are saying would be compelling. So yeah, basically they're admitting that they're so programmed, and if they weren't so programmed and brainwashed, then they would be able to admit that the vegans are right. That's what they're saying, essentially. And then he admits, he says, could I make as strong an argument for hunting as they do against murdering animals? No, I don't think I could. He literally admits that. So, I don't know. It'd be interesting to see, like, what these guys' audience, who I'm sure is a loyal audience who hunt themselves and stuff, like, what they think of this. Like, they go to this podcast and they're like, oh, these hunters, they're going to debunk the vegans. It's going to be so awesome. And then they start listening to it and they realize that the hunters are pretty much like, well, the vegans are right. We just don't want to admit it because we're programmed. I wonder what they think of this. I wonder if they're disappointed that their hunting podcasters were not able to hold up their end of the argument. It's pretty interesting. He keeps talking about how the conviction of the vegans is so strong and they believe in it so much that they're willing to go to jail and all this. And then he says, I don't think hunters would ever be willing to go to jail for hunting. It's just, even to think about, like, going to jail for hunting, like, what would that even entail? It doesn't even make sense, because it just doesn't. So, I mean, that in itself is telling. Because it doesn't make logical sense to go to jail fighting for the right to do something that harms, okay? Going to jail for veganism is fighting to do something to prevent harm. Going to jail fighting for hunting is going to jail for harm. Does that make sense? I mean, I just wish, I don't know. I wish I could talk to these two guys myself. And then they make fun of it a little bit. They're like, oh, what are you in for? Like, in a prison setting, what are you in for? Oh, I'm in for jumping on the stage, talking where Jeff Bezos is. And it's funny because even they can see how ridiculous getting charged for just going on a stage and speaking is. Like, even these hunters who are trying to debate against veganism they can admit that it would be ridiculous to go to jail for just speaking out for a cause. Okay, after 40 straight minutes of disclaimers, they're going to finally get into the debate. So I'm going to listen to the debate now and then give my thoughts afterward on how it went. See ya. Okay, but first I just want to say right off the bat, the DXC man that's talking with them describes like what is meant by giving animals a constitutional right and personhood. Like, they were talking about that earlier, like, oh, giving an animal personhood, ooh. But what he explains it as is just giving them the right not to be harmed, enslaved, and put in a cage. They were making it sound like they wanted animals to be treated exactly like humans, but no, it's not that at all. It's just they want animals to have the right to not be, killed, enslaved, stuffed in a cage, etc. So they weren't even being honest about that. So I don't know. Anyway, getting into the rest of this. Alright, I actually have to jump in here because the dude has no arguments, basically. He's just agreeing with everything the vegan activist is saying. But then he does try to attempt to make an argument, and the argument he tries to attempt to use is circle of life, animals eat other animals. And the thing that, kind of irked me a bit is the response to that is very simple, and the vegan activist didn't, respond exactly like this. He said some other things, but all you have to say to that is, we don't look to wild animals for our morality. We have moral agency, therefore a responsibility to do the least amount of harm. Wild animals are obligate carnivores, and we are not. We have the choice not to be cruel, so why would we choose to be cruel? Basically that's all you have to say, and I don't know. But also, the hunter said something interesting to where he was like, oh, hunting, it's enriched my life. He keeps saying that over and over, aka he's being very selfish, only thinking about himself, not considering the victim. And everyone knows that you can't just morally justify anything by saying you enjoy it. You wouldn't morally justify rape by saying that you enjoy sex or you enjoy raping. So that's it's just proving and showing how selfish he's being and how he's not considering the victim. And the other thing he's saying is it's not really the killing. It's not taking the lives of dozens of animals that makes me happy. It's just the experience of learning about the natural world and how the predator-prey relationship works and all that. So it just doesn't make sense, because if it's not the killing that makes you happy, why don't you just do something similar but without the killing? Why don't you do animal watching or animal filming or help conserve wildlife? There's no reason. You said it yourself, it's not the actual killing that makes you happy. You said it provides protein for your family, but everyone knows that you can get protein from other sources. So really you can't provide a reason why you have to literally kill the animal when you could. I am a vegan. I go camping all the time. I spend time in nature all the time. I observe animals in nature any chance I get. And who wouldn't want to do those things? But I don't have to kill the animal. Nobody does. It's just, it doesn't make sense to me why that has to be part of it. He just contradicted himself so bad. He just said if I kill an animal and leave 1,000 living, I feel good, I was part of all this, I was part of something. And then in the next sentence he said if humans were gone, it'd probably be the best thing that could happen because humans are ruining their habitats. Is that not a direct contradiction? To me it is. I don't know. Okay, now I'm at a point where I'm having a problem with this DXC activist guy and how he's kind of failing at answering the whole animals eat other animals thing. All you have to do is say they're obligate carnivores, we're not, therefore we have the choice to be cruel or not, so why would we choose to be cruel? That's all you have to say, but this dude went on into like, the guy was like, oh, like animals eat other animals. How are we going to stop them from doing that? I don't think it's about stopping them from doing that. It's about stopping humans from eating animals when they don't need to. I mean, but this guy went into this whole thing about like, oh, maybe in the future we could change the DNA of animals to where they don't need to be carnivores or to eat that. And that just seems really far-stretched and outlandish to me, and I just feel like he kind of failed there in the debate. Like, if this hunter was talking to Earthling Ed would tackle the whole animals eat other animals thing in like 2 minutes or less. So, I don't know, I was a little annoyed at that. When I'm personally doing outreach, and I have a few outreach videos on my YouTube channel, Alicia to Me, I have 3 of them so far, I always turn the conversation back to, okay, so how does that justify you paying for animal products? And I feel like this guy's not doing that, and I don't know. Just me saying my thoughts, I guess. Yeah, that was just really not effective and kind of a fail on the part of the DXC activist, because now the hunter's like, oh, well, I wouldn't want to change an elk, and, well, shouldn't the elk have the right not to be changed? And it's just silly, because I've never even heard that before, changing the DNA of an animal to make them not a carnivore or whatever. And an elk is also, they don't even eat meat, so I don't even know why he's saying elk, but, like, why the hunter was saying elk, but, yeah, it should always just be brought back when you're doing outreach or debates to, like, what is the justification for you taking an animal's life when you don't have to, or for you to buy animal products which are cruel when there's a not cruel alternative. It shouldn't be like about these like sci-fi, like maybe in the future things. It should be like, what is your moral justification for paying for these things right now? Also, he just said that when he kills a deer, he hangs, quote, it on his wall so that he can be part of the process and feel good. Like, it's really weird, because like serial killers will sometimes keep pieces of the people they've killed's body parts and hang it up or somehow keep it, and we would look at that and be like, oh, what a sick individual. But somehow when it's an animal, it's not sick anymore. I don't know. Now he says that the physical act of killing an animal makes him closer to the animal than other people are able to be to animals. Can you say creepy? Well, he just admitted that the pure enjoyment of killing animals is not justification for doing it. But he doesn't go and then provide justification for doing it. So basically, there's no justification for doing it from the man himself. But he says he has to earn the right to kill animals by understanding how nature works and how society works and what parts of their bodies he can eat and can't eat. But wait a minute, if you're carnivore and you're meant to be eating animals, how come there's parts you can eat and parts you can't eat? I mean, because last I checked, a lion can eat the whole entire animal, including their brains and asshole, so why can't you do that? That's pretty interesting, isn't it? He mentions the responsibility of understanding conservation, and that's just funny. I'm just going to redirect you to Earthling Ed for that one. He has a podcast about hunting where he debunks conservation. Basically, he goes through the facts and proves that, hunting does nothing to control population. Like, I could say all the reasons why, but I just want to direct you to him for that. Okay, so this is pretty interesting. The hunter says, the killing of the animal, once again, is not the part I enjoy. Like, I don't jump up and down when the animal dies. Like, I'm really calm when they die, and then I go over and think about it and thank them. I mean, first of all, thanking, like, if I murdered my neighbor and then I stood over them and thanked them for it, I'd still go to fucking jail for murder. So that means nothing. And my neighbor's not going to be happy that they died because I thanked them, So that doesn't make a lot of sense. If you don't enjoy killing an animal, why are you killing an animal, dude? Why don't you just, not kill an animal, I also just want to say that the only reason that hunters are so, emotionally and even spiritually, as sick as it is, attached to killing animals is because, as this guy said, he does it, his dad did it, his grandpa did it. It's literally just a bonding experience where you got a pat on the back from Pops and you cherish that, and you feel like you can't take the killing of the animal out of it, which is not true. Of course, you could just go camping with Pops, go camping with your son, the next generation. It's like, I don't know. He keeps saying over and over and over that he's so against factory farms, but like, dude, are you living in alignment with that value? Are you actively boycotting factory farms no matter what, including not going to restaurants, like you not having cheese, you're not hunting cheese, like cheese comes from a factory dairy farm. So are you actually acting in alignment with that, or are you just trying to make yourself look better and feel less guilty? And now he's just saying more things on which he agrees with us with, that like putting a cartoon chicken on a bag of dead chicken is a weird thing to do, and that, you know, Chick-fil-A is lying about, or not even lying, but just hiding the truth behind where they're getting their corpses and how they're getting their corpses. And he says he feels cheated when he sees factory farming. So, interesting. He literally says more people are going to buy a chicken sandwich if they're not connecting it to the dead chicken. So, I don't know. Sounds like surprisingly enough, this hunter has a more lean toward accepting the vegan philosophy than a lot of people who aren't hunters and just mindlessly buy animal products. I will say that. But, you know, it is also a whole other thing to personally enjoy the killing of animals, or to just kill animals as opposed to not doing that. I feel like it takes a special weird thing in your brain to justify killing. He talks about fair chase, and then he says, like, there's a lot of oxymoronic things in this topic. So basically he's admitting that there's a lot of contradictions in the logic behind hunting. From the man himself, ladies and gentlemen. So he keeps admitting, like, just the enjoyment of hunting isn't a moral justification. So he says he thinks about, is what he's doing a good thing? And he says, well, it's a good thing for my family. They love it. Well, actually, no. Meat causes heart disease, type 2 diabetes, cancer. As I said before, it's not a health food in any capacity. It causes our number one killers and pandemics. Of course, this was recorded before the pandemic, but so maybe your family enjoys the taste, but that doesn't mean it's a good thing. It's not even healthy for them. And then he says, is it good for the animal? Yeah. So I just have to laugh at that, because I just don't understand in what context killing an animal would be good for an animal. You're killing them. So he's saying it's good for the animal. There's more deer, there's more elk. So it's like, wait a minute. I thought you were hunting for population management. Now you're saying there's more deer and more elk. Like, which one is it? Okay, so we're coming to the end of this conversation now, and I'd honestly call it a conversation, not a debate, because the hunter just said, like, oh, I want to teach my son to be conscious of consuming and to do the best thing, and it's like, I would jump in and be like, well, not killing an animal is the best thing, but like this activist, he didn't like attempt to like respond to that. It was more of just a conversation with them talking about what they agree on than actually debating. If it were a debate, it would be more like the hunter's excuses being debunked. You know what I mean? Rather than just being like, oh, we both agree that factory farming is bad, you know? So I'm a little disappointed about that, for sure. I have full confidence that if someone like Earthling Ed or Joey Carbstrong, or even me, for fuck's sake, was talking to this guy, I'd be debunking his excuses and really making him think more than this guy did. But I don't know. Some people are more concerned about being polite, I guess. And the thing with DXE too is that they do, a lot of good things and make a lot of change on a political and legal level, but they are more welfarist than they are abolitionist. And I have a huge problem with that, which is why I would never personally go on with DXC. I would attend a protest held by them, but I would never join them because they have this whole thing of people who eat fish can still fight against fur and things like that. And I am more of an abolitionist, and I am more of a get to the fucking point. We have no reason to consume animal products in 2020 and beyond. And DXC is more with these things like this, they're more how can we improve the welfare and just talk about factory farming, but I am talking about not exploiting animals as a whole. And other activists that are abolitionists like me are talking about not exploiting animals as a whole. So weird stuff. He should have said, hey, there's no right way to do the wrong thing. You can't nicely kill someone, but instead he's just wrapping up the conversation. So I don't know, not how I would personally do it. It's been really interesting analyzing this, All right, that's that. I finally finished this podcast episode. With that being said, if you're out there and you want to debate me about veganism, I would absolutely adore to have you on my podcast. And I won't exclude any clips from the conversation like this hunter did. But I think in summary, this hunter kept contradicting himself. He still pays for factory farming even though he's claiming to be against it. He has a weird, I would say, sick relationship with killing animals to where he thinks it's a good thing to do, a meaningful spiritual kind of thing to do. He failed to provide any moral justification for what he's doing, and the contradictions of Hunter's logic are just everywhere. So I would love to analyze more Hunter's podcasts in the future, or just more anti-vegan kind of arguments, or just non-vegan arguments. But yeah, because like I said, we don't want to sit in an echo chamber of people that just agree with us. So yeah, there we go. Thanks for listening, and I hope you have a good day. Try not to get